Okay, so we are going to pick back up talking about the gymnosperms, and this word gymno here roughly translates to naked. So the gymnosperms are the naked seeds, meaning that they have seeds that are not surrounded by ovary or fruit tissue, which is going to be something we learn a lot about in our next plant group, the angiosperms. But for now, the gymnosperms. So let's take a look at our phylogeny here. So we have, here are our gymnosperms. So we have currently 4 extant phyla, that just means still living, not extinct. The Cycadophyta, the Ginkgophyta, the Gnetophyta, and the Conurophyta. And we're going to sort of go through and talk about each of these 4 groups. We also have them here in this little smaller phylogeny. So gymnosperms were present in the Carboniferous, but proliferated later in the cooler, drier climate of the Permian, where we had a climate that really favored gymnosperm expansion a little more. Gymnosperms tend to do well in drier areas, and one of the reasons they're going to compete better in drier areas is because, as we'll learn about, there's some important adaptations that allowed them to do well in a cool or hot and dry environment. So these guys dominated terrestrial ecosystems from about 250 to 65 million years ago, and then at that point angiosperms kind of took over, but we still find them being quite prevalent in high elevation or high latitudes, places where it gets kind of cold. They do quite well being adapted to cold, dry areas. So let's talk about our first of the phylum, the phylum Cycadophyta. So there are about 300 living species of cycads. Sometimes we just call them the cycads. They have large cones. Sorry. What we also might call strobili, and palm-like leaves. So one of the things about the cycads is that you have pretty dramatic differences between the male and female cones. And interestingly, you have flagellated sperm. And here is a micrograph of a cycad sperm with its flagella. I think it has something like 100 flagella, lots and lots of flagella. So this is, having a sperm with flagella is pretty rare after we get past the seedless vascular plants. So the phylum Cycadophyta do, however, have it. Many have tissues that are quite toxic to humans if they are eaten. And the cycads were sort of dominant at the same time the dinosaurs were. So actually, if we look at this image, it looks like a lot of those. So this certainly looks like a cycad. They sort of, the age of the cycads and the age of the dinosaurs were about the same time. Phylum Ginkgophyta. Or the ginkgos. You may have heard of Ginkgo biloba. It is the one remaining species. Sometimes people take it as an herbal supplement. So we would refer to this as a monotypic phylum, which means that there's just one species representing it, and that's Ginkgo biloba. One thing that's kind of cool about the ginkgos is that they have deciduous leaves that will actually fall off the tree in the autumn. Most other gymnosperms, by contrast, are evergreen. These are really popular as urban ornamentals because they actually tolerate air pollution really well, and so they can grow in cities really well. They are what we call Dioecious. So dioecious means that you have the different sexes on different trees. So this word dioecious actually translates into two houses. We have trees that are just male or trees that are just female, and this is determined by X and Y chromosomes just like it is in humans. If you are thinking about getting a ginkgo in your yard, which they are gorgeous, why not? Make sure you get a male tree, because the flesh of the seeds on a female tree, when they decay, have a extremely putrid odor that I've heard described being akin to rotting flesh or dog feces. I've actually smelled it myself. I think it smells more like dog feces, but either way, not really something you want in your yard, so make sure you get a male tree. Another cool phylum is the phylum Gnetophyta. Oops. So the phylum Gnetophyta has 3 genera. And these 3 genera are found in pretty different climates. We have tropical species, we have species in the deserts of the American Southwest, we have species in Africa. There's about 90 of these species, 90 different species, and a few of them are actually medically useful, such as ephedra. This is where we derive ephedrine. So here are 3 representatives of this phylum Gnetophyta. We have this really cool organism called Welwitschia. This is the plant, and this picture doesn't really show it very well, unfortunately, but this is the plant that's got some of the longest leaves in the world. Its leaves actually don't stop growing and die. A single leaf just keeps growing and growing and growing throughout its lifetime, so it ends up to be this big, curled. I always think of, like, have you ever seen those people who sometimes grow their fingernails out until they're super long and curly? It's like that with those leaves. They just keep growing and growing and growing. And then we have Gnetum, which is a tropical tree found in tropical regions of Africa and Asia. And this one actually looks a lot more like a flowering plant in some ways than a conifer, but it is in fact a conifer. And then we have ephedra, which we find in the American Southwest and actually many places in an arid region. And this is where we derive ephedrine, which is a decongestant. So we have some medical usefulness there. And then finally, the largest phylum of them all, and almost certainly the most familiar to you, the phylum Coryphophyta. So we're talking about 700 species here. Most are evergreen, although there are a few exceptions, such as tamarack trees. So they don't shed their leaves yearly. That's what being evergreen means. They keep their leaves all year long. This is a real advantage in places where there's a short growing season, such as high elevations and high latitudes where there's not a lot of sunlight, and the days and the season for a lot of sun is pretty short. Many have adaptations for this cold, short growing season. So we have a very extra thick cuticle on the leaves of conifers. We also have most leaves being needle-like or scale-like. And this reduction in surface area means that they lose less water and are likely to experience less damage from extreme cold. This phylum boasts some of the largest, tallest, and oldest organisms on Earth. So the largest would be the giant sequoia. The tallest, the California redwood, which I don't have a picture of. And the oldest, the bristlecone pine. So let's look at the different reproductive structures in this phylum. So we have both male cones and female cones. So the female cones, as you can see here, are going to hold the megasporangium, which will have the megaspore that will develop into the female gametophyte that will produce an egg. And the pollen cones have the microsporangia that will produce the microspores, aka the pollen grains, and those microspores will be producing sperm. Typically, we just end up with one egg per megagametophyte. I'm sorry, one egg per megasporangium, but numerous sperms per microsporangium. And as you can see, when you look at the tree, the female cones are typically much, much larger than the male cones. Okay, so let's look at the reproductive cycle of a gymnosperm. So the pine tree, this is the pine tree as an example, so we'll use the genus Pinus. So the pine tree, in this case, is the diploid sporophyte. The sporangia are located on the scale-like structures packed into a cone. And remember, we sometimes also refer to these cones, if we can spell it right, as strobili. So this is a heterosperous organism as a seed plant, meaning we have male cones and female cones. The male cones, which we might refer to as the microstrobilus, contain microspores that will develop into pollen grains. And the female cones are going to contain, female cones, we could also call them the megastrobilus, is going to contain megaspores in ovules that will develop into female gametophytes. And these female gametophytes are going to produce eggs. Okay, so I know there's a lot going on here, and it can be kind of hard to parse this out. So let's step through this. We have our diploid tree, and if we look closely, we see the female cones, which sometimes we also call seed cones, because eventually the seeds do develop on them. And we have our male cones, which we sometimes call pollen cones. Female cones are also sometimes called ovulate cones. So we have our female cones. And on our female cones, we're going to find the megasporangium. And okay, so we have the female cones, and if we look at a cone scale on one of the female cones, we have the megasporangium, which contains the megaspore. This megaspore will develop into a female gametophyte that will produce the egg. So there's the female component. Now let's look at the male component. So we have our male pollen cones, which produce our microsporangia, in which we have microspores that will develop into pollen grains capable of delivering sperm to the female. So when a pollen grain gets in proximity of the female structures, one of the nuclei within that pollen grain, known as the tube nucleus, is going to grow a pollen tube, and this pollen tube will deliver sperm to the eggs within the ovule. Then, at this process of fertilization, we've now re-entered the diploid stage. So this is alternation of generations, just like we saw in all of our other plant groups. It's just that the male and female structures, the male and female gametophyte structures, are essentially microscopic, so it feels and looks a little bit different. Once we have got back to the diploid state in our new embryo, we have our seed, which is our baby plant and its food source, surrounded by that protective coating. This seed can then germinate and divide by mitosis to eventually become a sexually mature adult again. So really it's all the same, it's the same story every time with a plant alternation of generations, just the structures and the players look a little bit different. And I know this is a lot to take in on this figure. We will also be going over this again in lab to kind of cement this life cycle. So I'm going to end there with this, and we're going to pick up talking about the angiosperms. So see you soon.